Welcome. In this animation tutorial, we're going to look at how to take a simple rigged character and animate it for movement. There's lots of different ways to go about doing this, a lot of different methods and strategies. This is just going to be one way that we can accomplish our objective. Before we get started in it, we do want to take care of a couple housekeeping things. One is to go into our preferences. So it's under the Harmony menu on the Mac. It's under that menu on Windows. And I want to make sure that stop motion keyframes is checked. Because when we're doing this, I find it's easier to begin the process by working with stop motion keyframes and not have tweening involved. It gives us, I believe, a better sense of timing. And also, always make sure that focus on mouse enter is selected as well. That's just going to be a given. That's something that we always want to make sure is active. Next, in my tool properties, we will regularly be switching between peg selection mode and turning it off. So when peg selection mode is active and I'm using my animation or transform tool, and I click on something, we see we get the yellow highlight and the yellow frame around it. That means we're going to be animating the peg. But if I turn off peg selection mode and click on something, we see it now has a magenta or purplish outline on it. And that's going to be useful for things that have drawing substitutions. So we do have access to different feet. So my feet, I have different options available for my character, so I can decide which foot I want to use at different points in the animation. Now that is in my drawing substitution, which is not up by default when you are working in Harmony. That's not one of the windows that's available. So if I close it, so it's no longer there, and we go back and we just see tool properties, if we want to choose it, or if you notice that there's other windows in my tabs that are not present on yours, you click on the plus, and then you go down and choose the thing you're looking for. In this case, I want drawing substitutions as part of it. So I have tool properties here, drawing substitutions. I will be going regularly between those. Now this character is a simple rigged character. If I switch over into the node view here, we can see that there are different nodes that are available. So I have my legs, arms, torso, and head, and a master peg for my character. I also have a peg for the upper body, so I can move that as a unit. That speeds up my animation. And then I have a master peg for the entire character, which we can use to scale the character or move the whole character within our scene. So when we want the character to do a complete move, say, across the frame or something, we can use this master peg to do that. So these are just some simple housekeeping things that we will want to know and worry about. Now, when it comes to working in the node view, we don't need to really do much with it right now. But if you are interested in it or curious about it, if I click on a particular node and then I go into my node view and want to know where that is, the letter O will focus on that node. Now if I zoom in, we'll see that it's selected right hand. If I click on this node, we can see that is now the upper arm. If I click on this node, go to this window and hit O on the keyboard, it now shows me that the torso artwork is selected. If I switch to a peg selection mode and click on this node and hit O, we see it's the right upper leg. Now it is important to understand a little bit of our hierarchies here. So each of the three limb parts, so in this case foot, lower, and upper, are equipped with their own pegs. Then there is a peg that controls the whole lower leg, so the lower leg and the foot as a unit. And there's a peg that controls the entire leg as a unit. So we're able to work with all of those as we set it up. So that speeds up our animation process. So this is just a little housekeeping and a little bit of insight into how this whole character rig is configured. But you shouldn't have to work in this because we can just select a node. And now if I want to go up, let me just zoom in on this. So here's the leg. And if I select this node and hit the letter B on the keyboard, we see it moved up to the next upper node. If I click on the foot node and hit B, it chooses the lower leg node because it goes up to the next higher node. And if I hit B again, it goes up to the next higher node. And if I hit B again, well, the next higher node after the leg master is the entire character scene peg. So that gets me there pretty quick. If I click on the shirt and if I hit B, it chooses the upper body. And if I hit B again, it now will choose the entire node. So this is how we will navigate quickly through our character by clicking and then simply hitting B to get what we want. Now if I click on the hand and then I hit B and hit B again, Shift B will actually bring me down my node chain. So it does work in that capacity. So just some understanding of how we work with this to control what we're doing when we animate. So now here is my character. And I can see that, well, it's a little bit big for the scene if I want him to jump because he'll clearly go out of frame. So two things I think I want to have happen here. One is that, well, we're also going to need to move and animate the character so that there is more of the character in increased exposure. We'll do that in a moment. We probably also want to put in a ground layer. Now, if I look at the whole character, we can see that, wow, that's a lot of layers. And this is a simple character. So yes, when we do a complex rig, things do grow very quickly. But when we're animating, this is all we look at. We just look at the master peg for the character. We don't want to see all those individual layers. There will be times where you will zoom in on a particular layer for selecting something for a substitution or to modify a particular part across a frame. But for the most part, this is all we need to do. If you're curious to what the drawing layer is, we can see that was the sketch that was used as the rough guide to plan out the final or finished artwork. Now zooming in, the sketch was black, but as I was drawing over it, I started recoloring things red just so I could see a difference between it. So when you're doing your sketch, the sketch doesn't have to be really precise. As you can see, it's kind of sloppy here, but it gave me a pretty good guide as to what I wanted to finish up my character, and the character is pretty close to what's there in its finished form. Adding in my ground layer so I have somewhere for him to stand, I'm just going to use this simple line right now. So let me zoom out on my scene, and we can just grab the line tool. I could draw one or I can use the line tool. Now I need to add a drawing layer to put it on. Call it ground. Now I would hope that when you work on your project that you decide to do a more interesting or complex ground with your scene. I am just going to put a line across here. I don't care if it's horizontal or not, but it gives me some understanding of start and finish of where I want my character to be. I want that ground to be behind my character, so I will drag that layer down, and we will extend out the exposure for our scene. And now if I want the ground to extend out, I simply click at the end and hit F5, function key F5. And once again, I will do this for my character as well. So my character has now been extended out into the scene. With that, I think we're ready finally to start animating. So remember that we have set the preferences. We're going to go into our tools, make sure that we have initially when we're animating, peg selection mode active. So if I click on the character, it now selects it. Step 1, I am going to, for my character, hit F6, function key F6. That inserts a keyframe. I'm also going to turn off my sketch layer. I don't need that. I'm going to lock it, and I'm going to lock the ground layer so I don't accidentally select those, so they're not going to affect what I'm doing. I'm going to scale my character. As you can see, we don't want to scale disproportionately, so make sure you hold down the shift anytime you are scaling. So I will shrink my character down so that with that character shrunk down, he can start on this side of the screen and then he can jump. So I'm going to build a simple jump animation with my character, and I'm going to have him jump kind of on this line and land on this line. I can use that as a guide so that I know I'm being consistent, because I can always draw over that ground layer or import an image and do something much more interesting and complex than just simply a boring straight line. Remember, we close it so we don't see the individual layers. We're only looking at the top peg. Click and hit F6 on the keyboard here. Next, if I want my character to hold his pose before he starts animating, so if I just want to hold this pose, well, I can just go and insert another keyframe here. If I don't do any change, maybe we'll just do a little head nod or something, but we'll figure that out. But what we're more concerned about is our bigger dynamic poses, so our key poses. So right now I have my starting position. Then I'm going to build my anticipation pose where the character is going to get ready to jump. So with that, I'm just going to move my scene so it's centered, make it a little bit bigger so it's easier to select. And with that, I want to put my character into a jump or preparing to jump position. So I click on that frame, I hit function key F6, that inserts my keyframe, and now we get to start animating. So I'll click on the thigh and hit B, and I'll move the leg. So I'm creating a bend. He's going to bend his legs for this, and I want to make it even a little bit more dramatic. So we'll bend that leg there, and now we'll rotate this leg over. Whoop. So I clicked on the lower leg. I forgot to hit B to choose the lower leg master, which includes the foot. So I'll just undo that, hit B again, and position my leg. Now I want to move this up a little bit because I don't want it sticking out the butt there. We'll rotate a little bit more. I'm going to rotate this a little bit more, and I'm getting it more into the shape or position that I am looking for. I'll rotate the hips because he's going to be bending forward at the waist. If I want to kind of get the character so he's positioned similar to where he was, I can turn on onion skinning. So now I can see where those feet were. So if I click on that frame so the master is selected, we can get it pretty close. Looks like I need to do a little bit of adjustment on this leg to line things up. And if I want to line it up so we can see it's not wanting to get that foot quite in that same area, we have a couple of options available to us. One is that I can just adjust that lower leg and pull that foot up, because we are doing frame by, or not frame by frame, but cutout animation. We have the luxury of doing that. Now I'm going to just turn off onion skinning. I don't need to see more of it. Click on the shirt, hit B to select the entire upper body peg, and now I can bend forward. So he's now bent forward. But as part of this, and the hair on the character is separate, so the hair can bounce around. Ideally, I'd have a second piece of hair with it, but it will suffice for what I want. I want to move the entire head and neck, so we'll pull the neck here. And now I'll click on the head, hit B, so that chooses the head and hair. There's a peg. And now I rotate the head back, so he's looking where he wants to go. And with that, I want to select the whole arm, pull it back. Now I'll select the hand, hit B to select the lower arm and the hand. Rotate the hand. He's getting ready. He's getting really excited about being able to do this jump. So as we move things around, we sometimes will have to adjust the limb part here, because if I look at the limb, we can see that the limbs are separate, but what they do have is they have something on them called auto patch. And what the auto patch does is it says, hey, where the outline is the same color and the fill is the same color, then what we can do is make the lines disappear where they overlap, so we create the illusion of a seamless joint. So he has auto patch applied to his knees, elbows, and wrists so that we have slightly better looking joints. Now we don't have tweening going on here, but if I want to see tweening going on, and if I click on this keyframe here, I could always turn on motion tween, and we can see how he moves into that position. We do have a little bit of movement on the feet we might have to take care of later, because if he's here, feet, it looks like they are ending up a little bit high, so let's turn it back to stop motion here. If I turn this on, yeah, I can see that should be a pretty easy fix. We can just pull them down a little bit. So when I go here, there's just that little bit of rotation on that foot, a little bit of rotation on this foot. Because if he's just gone down, we don't want, I mean, we could have where his heels would lift, but I don't have the feet separated with any type of deformers or other way to bend the toes. So we're going to be a little bit limited on what we can do with our foot animation here, and that's okay. All right, so now he's gotten ready to leap into the air, and that's where the character is going to make their next motion. So we'll move out some frames. Now the good part when we're doing stop motion like this is we're going to be able to adjust our timing to get a pretty good sense of the timing before we let the tweens work their way in and start kind of distracting us as part of it. So what I'd like to do is to rough in the key poses. So we have our starting pose, we have our anticipation for what we're going to do, and now we're going to do our jump, where the character is going to jump into the air. Now I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I can see where the top of my frame is, because this is where now I want to insert a keyframe about this far away, because the jump is going to be pretty fast, and then we'll have a float at the top, and then we'll come back down to the ground and he gets to land. If I don't want to use function key F6, I can just click the keyframe button right there, and notice it even has the keyboard shortcut that says F6, so function key F6 after that. So I've now clicked on that. We'll move him to a new position. This is where he is going to be jumping, and I'm going to rotate the whole character forward as part of that, and we'll be pulling the legs down. All right, so now that we know about where he is, I'll zoom in a little bit more so it's easier to select body parts as I'm working with them. This is a time where I think I'm probably going to pull in a drawing substitution because I want to change the position of that foot. So I don't just want rotated, but I want to have a different angle for the foot. So I go into Tool Properties, turn off Peg Selection Mode, click on the foot, go into Drawing Substitutions, and now I'm going to make this one be that, and I want this foot to be here. Go back to Tool Properties, select Peg, click off, click on. Now it's yellow. So when something is selected, another way to deselect is you hit the Escape key on the keyboard and that deselects. And that's another thing that you can do with it. But what I think I want to rotate this down a little bit more, rotate this back, and I'm going to make that. So that's getting me close to what I want. And now as he's reaching skyward, he led with his head as he went up, but now I think we can straighten that so the neck is movable on this character as well. And let's see, I think today I'm feeling that I want his arms to go down as part of the motion. If you're trying to figure out what should you do for your motion, for your movement, sometimes you have to experience it, where you have to actually do it. You have to put yourself in that motion so you can feel what it feels like. So we're here to here. Let's zoom out a little bit so I can see a little bit better. So jump, boom. I like that. So he's going up. He compresses down, his arms are compressed, and he throws his arms down, stretches his legs out, getting high up into the air. Now he's going to move into the float. So this is where he will be able to now float above the middle of the arc. Now, I'm just working on the poses here. One thing to keep in mind when we do this is it's not a bad idea to rough out your animation where you actually sketch it out. You sketch out the key poses, much like we're doing with our stop motion animation, so we have a guide of what we're trying to do. It also means as we do that, that if this layer isn't locked, and I'm now on this layer, we'll just kind of figure it out as we go. But if we're on this layer, what it means is we can, so let me just put a little mark here so I know that's where he starts, jumps, going up. So what I want to do is to plant. So I'm thinking about, what is the path that he is following here? So he's going to crouch down, and I'm looking at the path for his feet. So now as we go a few frames above here, once again I will click here, either F6 or click the keyframe button. Click back on my character, peg selection mode is active. So now I can put my character, he's going to be at the top of the arc. And with this, we'll rotate forward as he's been leading with his chest and head. Now let's zoom in a little bit so I can select. And as we build this animation, one of the things that we're going to be doing as part of it is we will look at opportunities to add in some secondary movements as the animation develops. So as our animation progresses and we get the key parts of it done, then, and only then, do we go back and say, start worrying about, well, what is the character doing? You know, how do we want to have the hands move, or the hair move? We do those subtle things, but we first take care of the big parts of the animation here. So we try and get the big portions in place, and then we'll start adding in our smaller secondary elements. But we're always thinking about moving across an arc, because animation works best when it follows an arcing shape. It's more aesthetic. It also is more natural in what we're doing. So now it's almost like he's riding this like a slide. So he's jumping up, pulling up into there, riding like he's on a slide. And now he's going to work on coming down. So we really have two poses that we want to work on. One stretching towards the ground, and the next pose will be then when he lands or contacts the ground. So that will be the next two poses that we will add to the mix here. So I can click and add a keyframe. I had one part selected, so let me just undo that. So if I just have something selected and I add a keyframe, we notice that it gives me a white square instead of a red dot. What that means is it added keyframes for those layers, but not for every layer in this peg and beneath. Therefore, we're going to get some unexpected movement in our animation. So there's times where you want to do that when we start adding in the little subtleties of the hand and the hair, tweaking the head position, stuff like that. But right now, make sure that the master peg is selected, and we can do that by just clicking in the frame and then click keyframe or function key F6. So I was there, now I'm here. Now we'll move the character, so now he's going to start the descent here. He's reaching for the ground. So we're trying to figure out, what are the positions, the items that I'm looking for. It looks like I need to zoom in a little bit so I can select things a little bit easier. I like this idea that he's really kind of leaning back, but I'm going to have him start to pull his head forward a little bit, because he wants to he's trying to spot his landing. So the arms aren't really going to do a lot of change here as he's reaching down, but instead are going to just really open up. So we can see, and it really does seem that he's going on a slide. So we prepare for the jump, leap into the air, compress at the top, almost. I want to make it even more. So he's really trying to maximize how much air he has achieved as part of this. I just have to adjust a little bit so we can see, so we don't see the legs breaking the hips. Now we'll still leave it back. So he's now working his way down. Gonna have to, whoop. Gotta be careful I don't hit the button on my stylus accidentally. And coming in for landing here. And the timing on these frames, we'll be adjusting this timing a little bit once we start getting more, once we have the next two poses, which will be the landing and then the recovery from that, or the follow through. So now we get to move the character down, rotate, figure out, and as the character lands, probably is going to have to absorb some of this. Well, don't grab the corner when you're trying to rotate, because that will cause it to be weird. So we'll put down a foot. Move the hips over a little bit, and let's see how this leg wants to rotate. It's going to allow us to get, looks like we're going to be able to get onto the ground okay there. I want to now move all of my characters so it's more following the same place where the front leg was a little bit lower on the ground than the back leg. Now, as he comes forward, he's going to land, pull the head back a little bit, and the arm will come forward for balance. And repeat that process. So you can see he's probably, if he tried to stay like this, he would most likely fall over. So as he stands up, he's going to have to shift his weight over there a little bit to try and find that sense of balance. So now once again, add on a keyframe, and I want to return to a standing pose. And this is where I want to show something fun. I can go back to this starting keyframe, and my mouse is, or cursor is in the timeline. If I copy that keyframe, okay, that's, somehow I just zoomed all the way in. Let's try again. Copy that keyframe, go to this ending keyframe here. So we had here, so now at this, I want him to return to that same pose. So I can just simply paste that keyframe and now move him over. What I need to do is turn on my onion skin to see where that landing was so we can try to figure out. Now, I probably won't keep the pose exact. I don't want it to be exactly the same. I mean, if nothing else, I want to turn off or switch out my feet, drawing substitutions. Let's go grab that foot there. And now grab this foot here. And then hit escape on the keyboard, tool properties, peg mode. So you always have to remember that we're doing this. And now click here. I'm going to just rotate that a little bit. And so we can go from here to here. I think I'm going to open the legs up. So I'll work on this leg first. We'll open that, flatten that foot out a little bit there, and I need to extend that down and move that foot. So I'm trying to align it so the heel is kind of lining up with that, and then we can rotate it ever so slightly. So now when we go between the two frames, we can see how he's standing tall. I'm going to just give him a little more backward lean as part of it. Go into the head here, pull it down because he's now proud of himself, and pull that arm down there, and this arm here, and just a little bend into it. So it's similar, but it's not quite the same. We'll put a stop in here at the end right there. Turn on looping. Zoom out so we can see our whole thing. And he's now jumping. I kind of wish I put the arc on a separate layer so I could just turn it off and leave the ground. But it definitely is giving me a pretty good starting point. If I want to add in tweening, I can select my frames, turn on motion keyframes. Now let's try again. And this is where using motion keyframes is not always going to give us the results we want. We can see in the air it's not too bad, but on the ground we're getting some problematic movements. And these are things that now we need to fix if we're going to use the motion keyframe. Realistically, when we start doing cutout animation, it seems like motion keyframes are going to be used for everything. The reality is we often just turn them off and add in additional keyframes as we need them so we have better control over what is happening. And sometimes if we like, say if I go here and turn on a motion keyframe right here, and I like what is happening. Now, I don't necessarily need that part of that, but let's see. Okay, so that's not too bad. Let's turn on this sequence here. And as he gets to here, I really think I would rather make my own right here. So I can say add a keyframe. And here I'm going to turn off motion keyframe as well. So I'll just go to here and even at this point start adjusting what is there, because as he's trying to get here, I want the legs, the feet, I think I want them to change sooner after the jump. So tool properties, turn off the peg, click on the foot, drawing substitution, and we'll grab that foot there, click on that foot and grab that one there, and tool properties, turn back on the peg, click off, click on, and start rotating. So it's more the sense that he has created that jump, and with it, I'm going to even start pulling it back there. So I like that motion better. So tweening is great. It allows us to sometimes get some of those in-between things, but we often will use it more sparingly than using it through the whole of the animation. So now as I'm going to here, that tween's pretty good. So maybe we'll leave that. Let's just turn off onion skinning. We don't really need that right now. Let's turn this one on and see are we getting anything. We're not really getting or losing because it's a small enough change. So tweening does work, but it works best across smaller movements. Big movements on character animation is where it often will break down. So from here to here, that's problematic. Now, I might want to even take and pull this keyframe tighter. So as I come down, and get that sense that the character's really hit the ground and is now standing up. And it's this motion of the standing up that we probably need to work on adjusting that timing. So we're kind of hanging, and now this is happening really fast. So if I'm going to do that, probably do need an in-between. So let's turn on tweening, see what in-between pose we get. I don't really like that in-between pose. I'd like something closer to this pose that he's going to carry down and then he's going to slam into the ground. So instead, let's stop motion that. Take this pose here, copy it. Let's go, say, 2 frames before. Paste. We generally never want to put our keyframes right on top of each other, back to back, unless we're doing a flip. If we're doing a flip, like a horizontal or vertical flip, then we might put them back to back so we don't get that point where we see it disappear in time. And we'll take a look at that in just a moment. But what I can do now is slide the character so he's coming down, and I'm going to just start bringing him a little bit more in line with where that next pose is going to be. So we can see before, boom, boom. So now we have that in between. Let's run that and see. And that certainly works better. But he hits and then stands up. So we now need to, after we hit, work on that next pose. So getting from here to the standing, which if we look, we can see how it, from here, it does that slide on the ground. So we don't really want that. But what we can do is grab a keyframe here. And this is really where using our tweening can be really useful, because it gives us those intermediary frames. So we've come forward and then up. So now we just need to locate that up. Let's see. So it's pretty close here. So hit, that movement's acceptable, and then now at this point we can see that frame now needs to, so if we're here, that now we can have a little bit of that movement on the foot, that little bit of rotation up. And let's see if we can get the tweening to work for it. So we need to capture at this point. So part of it is we have a foot swap going on. We go from that foot to this other foot, so we get a little bit of change there. But I think what I want to do is to add in another keyframe right here, so we can really start to capture that foot. Now as he stands up, let's just pull the whole character. Whoa. So a little bit of movement there I think is going to be okay with the foot swap. Or what I need to do is after he lands, swap it out here. So click on the foot and swap it sooner. So he lands, we swap it here. Let's go back to tool properties, select that. Let's grab this foot. Zoom in a little bit more so I can see. So the foot's pretty lined up here, go here. We can see now the foot's a little bit off there, and pull this back down. So we will need to stretch the leg so it fits. Stretch the leg so it fits. All right. Now, so we're on our way to getting smooth motion, and using the tweening, ultimately, when it's all done, we generally get rid of any tweening and have it baked onto keyframes. So we clean up every keyframe that we've added into our project, so we just have frames. So we don't use the tweening, but we use it in the beginning as a way to help smooth out and calculate some of those movements as we are trying to line things up. So we can see how he's really kind of standing at the end and going. Now his hair has been fixed the entire time. So I want to start thinking about his hair. So his head is here. As he pulls down, I want to, and just zoom in a little bit, we'll just rotate his hair down just a little bit. So as he's going forward, his hair is coming down. And now as he jumps, let me just figure out the poses here. So we'll pull the hair down more as he's doing that jump because it's being slow to move with it. Now as he's getting higher here, the hair can start to rise up. So as he hits his apex of the jump, I'm going to start to pull the hair up. So as he works his way down, the hair is really starting to rise up. Now it's going to start catching up with him a little bit, so we can see it was up, catching up. And as he lands here, the hair, so the hair can land with him. And I'm going to go 2 frames later, and now the hair is really going to drop down. And at this point, his hair is on its way back to normal. So let's see, it dropped down and then back to normal. So we added just a little extra movement in on the hair. So let's run it and see. So it's subtle, but it now gives a little bit of extra movement and life. So adding the drag into the hands, I need to think about as the arm goes forward to that position with the hand up. So as the arm starts to go up and bends. What I really want to have happen is from here, as we move over a couple frames, I want to take the hand and rotate the hand down a little bit so that as the arm goes forward, it's playing catch up. So as this arm is now the front arm is bending forward, I'm going to pull that one aside so as it goes forward, that hand is back, and now it's catching up to what's there into that position. Now as I jump and he throws his arms down and out, I want this hand here to be further out. And this is also in this character where what would be nice is if we had drawing substitutions for the hands as well, so that we could then add more to them. So as he brings that arm up, as he goes down here, pretty happy with that. Down and lands. And see the arm is going down. From here, land. Actually, on this particular one, I want to land. Nope, I don't like what I just did. We'll leave it. So he's landing balanced with the hands. You know, his arms are forward for balance. Comes down forward for balance. Pulls the arms back. Stands up. And just rotate that hand back a little bit there. Now it comes forward. And standing tall. I'm going to just go over a couple more frames here and add in another keyframe. And this time I'm just going to bring him into a little bit more neutral of a pose, because I feel like he's standing, you know, like a little too chest forward for what I want there. And I just pull the neck there, pull the head back. Do watch at the chin, we have a gap along the chin there on the head where there is no line, the corner of the jawbone, so you have to be careful that you don't move the head and leave a gap showing out, because that's not going to be attractive with it. All right, let's zoom back out and see what we have happening here. And this keyframe here, we could turn on motion and let's see how that. And that, because it's a small movement, the motion keyframe is useful. So we use a mix of motion and stop motion keyframes as we work our way through. We resize things, we adjust, but what we don't want to do is any real dramatic distortions of parts yet. We're going to add in deformers, which gives us way more control going forward of how we do those adjustments. We'll be doing that, but I do want to point out now, I talked about doing a flip. So if I now move, and let's say we go a couple frames here and I want him to then just turn, we'll just have him turn his head. So let's say I select the head here and I want to flip it. Well, we do have a flip option. I mean, I can take and grab the head and flip it like that, because we're effectively doing a rotation on that point. We're rotating on the y-axis, or I can go up here and we can see where I have flip horizontal. I can choose flip horizontal. Now let's zoom in and adjust for the neck a little bit. So now he's looking back the other way. So we can see where he just does a simple head swap. It's funny when you make the artwork reverse, sometimes it just feels, well, I guess because his body is tilted, it looks wrong. So we're here, and let me just extend out my stop point so we can see what's happening with that. Now so he jumps, turns his head. So stop motion keyframe works okay for that. But if I turn on a motion keyframe, we'll see that the head effectively becomes 0 width. So it gets skinnier, 0, skinnier, back. So we're rotating it. We're doing effectively what we're doing with that head is we're doing, we're rotate like that. So we can see it's like a flat piece of paper rotating around. And that's super ugly. So we never want to tween it that way. That's going to be super bad if we do the tween on it. So let me just put this back to stop motion. So if we go a single frame, then that can work. So we're flipping it over. So either the keyframes have to be back to back or we have to be using stop motion. So if we have tweening going on, this keyframe would have to be directly next to it so we don't have any frames in between, that we can see that where it becomes 0 on its thickness, where we realize that this is a flat cutout piece of artwork. So now if we do this, but I don't want them to switch right away. I want that gap in time. So we need to put in that little bit of spacing happening there. But I do kind of like he goes and now he turns his head to watch, where he came from on it. So that can work. So once again, jump, land, turn, and he snaps the head. Now what would be nice as part of that is if my hair was composed of more pieces, I could animate the hair a little bit as it goes across, but because the hair is just that one single clump, it's kind of hard to do it. When we add in more complex deformers, we will create the capacity for doing much more sophisticated kind of turning of characters. But for right now, this should give you some good insight into how you can use simple drawing substitutions, a mix of motion and stop motion keyframes to establish your poses, to create animation that we can use for jumping, we can use it for walking, we can use it for anything when we're trying to breathe life into a character. Good luck and have fun.